We willingly blind ourselves with the golden illusion of Hollywood, worshipping every powerhouse and beloved icon who conquers the dazzling stage lights. We envy their wealth, assuming a glamorous life awaits them behind the scenes. But beneath that forgiving spotlight, an invisible punishment was quietly executed. Tonight, the illusion shattered. We expose the earth-shattering secret of 15 legendary black stars who collapsed under fame's crushing pressure, vanishing into an unfillable void of poverty, addiction, and utter abandonment. This is the price of the crown. Red Fox. Dozens of crew members were laughing hysterically, completely unaware that they were watching a legendary entertainer draw his final, agonizing breath under the forgiving spotlight. On a fateful October day in 1991, the comedic powerhouse stiffened his posture, clutched his chest in deep physical distress, and violently crashed onto the hard studio floor during a rehearsal for his comeback sitcom, The Royal Family. For 30 seconds, the room roared with amusement. Then 60 seconds passed, and panic began to bleed into the room. By the mark of 90 seconds, a suffocating, deadly silence fell over the set. The production crew had blindly assumed he was merely recreating his iconic Fred Sanford heart attack routine from Sanford & Son. But this time, the trickster wasn't getting back up. By the time the paramedics frantically rushed through the doors, his heart had completely stopped. The beloved icon died right there on set, surrounded by a crowd of onlookers, yet entirely abandoned by a true safety net. Rewind to the dazzling zenith of the 1970s, and his reality was the absolute pinnacle of the golden illusion. He was an unmatched titan raking in an astronomical $4 million a year, ruling over lavish mansions, a fleet of luxury vehicles, and even his own personal casino. He commanded the dazzling stage lights across America, splashing his immense wealth generously on friends and wild nights. But a silent predator of severe gambling addiction and reckless extravagance was quietly gutting his financial empire. The grand illusion shattered with a devastating, sudden drop when the IRS arrived to collect back taxes, exposing an earth-shattering secret. He was drowning in a catastrophic $3.6 million debt. The systemic blade of financial ruin sliced away his dignity. His property was ruthlessly seized, his luxury cars were auctioned off, and his fine jewelry was stripped away, exiling him to a shabby, run-down apartment in Las Vegas. He spent his final years wasting away beneath fame's crushing pressure, becoming increasingly isolated, bitter, and ignored by the very industry he built. When his body finally surrendered, a man who had generated millions of dollars did not possess a single dime to fund his own funeral, leaving his closest friends to desperately chip in to cover the burial costs. The ultimate tragedy of the comedic stage is that your final cry of raw agony can be celebrated as a brilliant piece of acting. The echoes of a final, misunderstood laugh dying out on a Hollywood soundstage instantly dissolve into the chilling, theatrical howling of a rock and roll madman clutching a human skull in the hazy shadows of a lonely European night. Turner. As a cheap liquor bottle sitting in the dust of a rundown San Marcos home, I watched the freezing stillness settle over the room on December 12, 2007. I bore silent witness to the final, ragged gasps of a rock and roll pioneer whose body lay cold on the floor, surrounded by needles and a chaotic mess of junk. There was no grand entourage, no time to call for help, only the bitter chill of a lethal cocaine overdose compounded by chronic lung disease. Decades earlier, I would have been a fine crystal glass reflecting the dazzling stage lights of a musical powerhouse. He was an undisputed titan who birthed rock and roll, commanding millions in profits, luxury cars, and lavish mansions, while cultivating the golden illusion of immense artistic success. But behind that pristine veneer lay a horrifying double life fueled by a relentless addiction. The illusion shattered completely behind closed doors, where drugs transformed him into a brutal monster who viciously beat Tina Turner until she fled into a rainy night in 1976 with just 36 cents in her pocket. Following their 1978 divorce, the systemic blade of public backlash and financial ruin sliced away his entire empire. The very hits that made him rich now belonged to Tina, plunging him into deep obscurity. He became a drifter, desperately selling off everything, even the historic guitar used to record Rocket 88. he was left wasting away under fame's crushing pressure, battling a merciless foe of total isolation as old colleagues avoided him. When his heart finally surrendered, his quiet funeral had no crowd, no adoring fans, and no family by his side. The icy stillness of a discarded liquor bottle watching a fallen king rot in obscurity seamlessly shifts into the dim, clinical shadows of a riverside hospital room, where the raw, agonizing final cries of a legendary blues queen were being swallowed by a cold morphine haze. Etta James, 84 pounds, bald, unable to walk. These cold, clinical metrics defined the horrific final days of a legendary powerhouse whose voice once moved nations. When death finally arrived on January 20th, 2012, inside a frozen hospital room in Riverside, California, the grand illusion shattered into an unfillable void. She lay there gasping for air, her skeletal, skin-over-bones frame bearing absolutely no trace of the sublime icon who once commanded the dazzling stage lights. The tragic math of her descent reveals an invisible punishment that ran parallel to her fame. During the height of her 1960s success, she earned hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, yet she was secretly living a devastating double life, burning through an astronomical $1,000 a day just to feed a relentless heroin addiction. When the cash dried up, her desperate survival strategy devolved into selling her precious Grammy Awards and diamond rings, eventually leading to a 1973 arrest for forging morphine prescriptions. She spent decades wasting away inside the dark cells of rehab facilities, writhing through withdrawal on cold concrete floors while a silent predator consumed her identity. The systemic blade of addiction didn't just carve up her career. It stole her family, leaving her 2 sons to grow up without a mother as she vanished into needle-strewn alleys. By the 2000s, her body became a compressed battlefield for a merciless foe: hepatitis C, dementia, and finally, leukemia. In her final moments of raw agony, no children or family kept vigil. Only a few unfamiliar nurses watched the blues queen fade into utter solitude. The quiet, labored breathing fading into the clinical silence of a hospital room instantly collides with the freezing, howling winds of a New York night, where a brilliant soul genius was listening to terrifying, invisible whispers inside a locked hotel room. Screamin' Jay Hawkins. In a sterile hospital room in France in the year 2000, a 70-year-old man died on an operating table surrounded entirely by strangers. Doctors frantically tried to repair a ruptured aortic aneurysm, a merciless foe that cut off his labored breathing. The surgery failed, triggering a devastating sudden drop into oblivion. His body sat unclaimed in a foreign morgue for days without a single visitor, forcing the hospital to handle his burial. This lonely end shattered the golden illusion of his musical legacy. Under the dazzling stage lights, he was a rock and roll powerhouse who turned stages into graveyards, clutching a human skull and howling like a demon. The public worshipped this unforgettable icon, unaware of the unfillable void in his soul. Since the 1960s, he lived a chaotic double life, consuming up to 3 bottles of liquor a day while drifting through hazy bars. He slept with over 1,000 women and fathered between 57 to 100 children. Yet, this massive bloodline hid an earth-shattering secret. He abandoned them all, leaving his kids to grow up without a father. His body was wasting away under fame's crushing pressure, enduring an invisible punishment for his self-destructive habits. The terrifying reality of his life proves that you can bring 100 children into this world and still face death in total isolation. The suffocating silence of an unclaimed body in a French morgue abruptly collapses into a chaotic, drug-fueled fortress in California, where another music pioneer turned his brilliant empire into a domestic war zone. Donny Hathaway. Long before his physical body collided with the frozen pavement of a New York sidewalk, a silent predator had already completely hollowed out his brilliant mind. To a global audience, he was a soul genius whose velvet voice melted hearts, standing firmly at the top under the golden illusion of 1970s stardom. But away from the dazzling stage lights, he lived a terrifying double life, locked in a daily war against his own psyche after being diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. He refused standard medical treatment, diving into a spiral of heavy drinking to drown the hostile, invisible whispers echoing through his skull. This mental degradation acted as an invisible punishment, completely warping his reality until he became convinced that his own wife was actively plotting his murder. As his paranoia intensified, his illusion shattered. He locked his doors, cut off all contact, and watched helplessly as his wife, children, and terrified friends drifted away, leaving him to face fame's crushing pressure inside an unfillable void. The final, tragic sudden drop occurred on January 13, 1979. During a New York recording session with Roberta Flack, he began rambling about unseen entities wiring his brain, causing her to leave him alone in room 1506 at the Essex House Hotel. At 12:06 a.m., a horrific crash echoed through the freezing winter night as he fell from the 15th floor, his body broken beyond recognition. Inside the perfectly neat room, a lone bottle of liquor rolled on the floor, the quiet testament to a psychological ghost who had ceased to exist long before his body ever touched the ledge. The chilling echo of a broken body fracturing against the frozen concrete seamlessly transforms into the deafening roar of a packed stadium, where an American sports idol was blindly sprinting toward a dark labyrinth of televised murder, public disgrace, and a slow, agonizing disease. O.J. Simpson. A creaky ceiling fan hummed softly over a cluttered, run-down Las Vegas living room at 2:15 p.m. on April 10, 2024. Beneath it, a neighbor discovered the cold body of a man stretched out on a couch, having already lain dead for hours. The final forensic ledger of this fallen giant recorded no family, no friends, and no heartfelt goodbyes. Prostate cancer had acted as a merciless foe, leaving him wasting away in deep physical pain within a home entirely stripped of glamour. This squalid ending completely ripped away the golden illusion of his celebrated youth. Decades earlier, he was an American sports powerhouse whose jaw-dropping athletic feats under the stadium floodlights drove the entire nation wild. He was an adored cultural icon, raking in millions from premium commercial endorsements and starring in Hollywood comedies like The Naked Gun. But his reality experienced a catastrophic sudden drop into toxic tabloid fodder in 1994, when he was accused of the brutal murders of his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend Ron Goldman. Though a globally televised trial saw him technically beat the criminal charges, the killer label became an inescapable, invisible punishment that shadowed his every move. The systemic blade of a subsequent civil suit ordered him to pay a staggering $33 million, instantly bankrupting him and vaporizing his mansions, luxury cars, and lucrative contracts. Left with just a beat-up vehicle and an unfillable void, his isolation deepened after a 2007 armed robbery conviction landed him in prison for 9 years. He emerged a total outcast, ignored by his children and despised by society. His lonely death proves that even the brightest, most forgiving spotlight can permanently warp into a life sentence of total alienation. The heavy, clinical silence enveloping a disgraced sports hero's lonely couch instantly dissolves into the white-powdered, frantic bass lines of a chaotic Los Angeles bedroom, where another titan of extravagant excess was actively converting his musical royalty into a toxic death sentence. Rick James. In the 1980s, he set the world ablaze with Super Freak, reigning as an absolute powerhouse of funk and soul under the dazzling stage lights. Millions of dollars, sold-out global tours, lavish mansions, and an endless entourage at his beck and call cemented his legendary status within the golden illusion of musical royalty. Yet, the exact moment the stadium cheers faded, a silent predator claimed his existence. Cocaine became his destructive lifeline, triggering a catastrophic sudden drop into a dark double life where he burned through thousands of dollars a night on week-long benders. The glamorous illusion shattered under the weight of public scandals, domestic violence charges, and legal warfare, forcing record labels and old colleagues to steer clear of his name. By 2004, the Funk King was completely wasting away inside a shabby, trash-strewn Los Angeles house, his hands trembling from years of systemic abuse as he battled a merciless foe of diabetes, a previous stroke, and severe liver damage. At 4 a.m. on August 6, 2004, he managed a garbled emergency call before collapsing alone. Medics arrived to find him motionless on his bed, his body cooling in an empty room devoid of family or fans. The autopsy exposed an earth-shattering secret. a fatal heart attack with a toxic cocktail of 9 different drugs coursing through his system. His isolated death serves as a haunting critique of fame's crushing pressure, proving that the loudest applause cannot fill an unfillable void. The chaotic, drug-induced cardiac arrest of a funk titan suddenly quietens into the oppressive, velvety silence of a New York apartment, where a brilliant soul queen was methodically counting out a lethal dose of sedatives to numb her own agonizing emptiness. Phyllis Hyman, a silent predator of severe depression, silently devoured her mind from behind the golden illusion of ultimate musical elegance. Under the dazzling stage lights of the 1980s, she reigned as a soul queen, captivating the world with iconic hits like "You Know How to Love Me," while gracing premium magazine covers. But the forgiving spotlight was a mask. Every wave of public applause only deepened an unfillable void within her spirit. The relentless pressure of public expectations and intense inner insecurities functioned as an invisible punishment, driving her into a hidden double life where she consumed entire bottles of liquor and heavy sedatives just to numb her hollow reality. As this profound dependency grew into a merciless foe, her personal sanctuary disintegrated. She had no close family or children, and fleeting romances merely inflicted more jagged emotional scars, causing her closest friends to drift away as her behavior became increasingly isolated and erratic. By the early 1990s, the systemic blade of the music industry fell as labels lost interest and gigs dried up, leaving her to watch her glorious career completely wasting away. The final illusion shattered on the night of June 29, 1995, inside her suffocatingly quiet New York apartment. Succumbing to fame's crushing pressure, she took a lethal overdose of sleeping pills. When her assistant discovered her lifeless body on the bed the next morning, it was the definitive proof of a psychological ghost whose spirit had tragically died long before her body finally surrendered to the dark. The profound, silent isolation of a New York bedroom abruptly collapses into the cold, mechanical trap of a luxury estate's elevator car, where a global musical prophet was silently losing his final battle against an agonizing physical torment. Prince. On April 21, 2016, a devastating sudden drop into silence occurred inside a Paisley Park elevator in Minnesota. Assistants found the lifeless body of a musical genius slumped on the floor, his labored breathing long gone. The autopsy exposed an earth-shattering secret. He had succumbed to a counterfeit fentanyl overdose, a painkiller 50 times stronger than heroin. This cold reality violently shattered the golden illusion of his eccentric empire. Under the dazzling stage lights, he was an absolute powerhouse and creative icon behind hits like Purple Rain. Yet behind the forgiving spotlight, a silent predator of profound grief devoured him. Following 2 failed marriages and the tragic death of his infant son, he retreated behind invisible walls, completely isolated from the world. Plagued by severe performing injuries, he lived a hidden double life, using heavy painkillers as a tragic survival strategy against constant raw agony. His body was wasting away under fame's crushing pressure until his heart finally surrendered to a merciless foe. Not even monumental success could bridge the unfillable void in his soul, leaving him to die entirely alone in a mechanical box. The silent, metallic descent of a luxury elevator sealing a musical genius in darkness instantly collapses into the smoke-filled, claustrophobic air of a dingy New York room, where a bruised jazz queen was singing her final sorrowful ballad to empty walls. Billie Holiday. The American entertainment industry functions as a systemic blade, eagerly exploiting black genius before abandoning it to the shadows of history. During the 1930s and 40s, this unmatched icon reigned supreme, projecting the golden illusion of immense vocal royalty under the dazzling stage lights with haunting ballads like Strange Fruit. The public deeply adored her performances, completely blind to the fact that her offstage existence was an invisible punishment forged from societal racial prejudices and a string of deeply destructive, toxic romance choices. Her dazzling career merely masked an unfillable void. She lived a harrowing, desperate double life, using alcohol and heavy narcotics as a tragic survival strategy to numb the unhealed wounds festering in her soul. As her music contracts systematically vanished, a silent predator of severe addiction stripped away her remaining wealth. Her illusion shattered completely by 1959, leaving her a fragile shadow of her former glory, locked away in a dingy New York room in total isolation. Her frail body was rapidly wasting away from advanced cirrhosis, a merciless foe that ultimately left her comatose and gasping for air before she closed her eyes forever on July 17, 1959. Hollywood proudly commodified her historic pain for massive profit. Yet when her final hour arrived, she suffered a quiet tragedy, dying entirely alone without a grand funeral, family, or a single loved one keeping vigil by her bed. The chilling abandonment of a legendary voice fading away in a lonely room violently cuts into the reckless bedtime routine of a guitar icon, whose final cry for sleep would permanently silence his strings. Jimi Hendrix. A single, desperate choice before bed can instantly morph into a permanent death sentence. On September 18, 1970, in London, the legendary guitar genius swallowed 9 Vesperax sleeping pills, an astounding 18 times the recommended dose, to dull his severe psychic pain. This fatal decision became a merciless foe, triggering a sudden drop into eternity. In the 1960s, he was a supreme icon and musical powerhouse, completely ruling the dazzling stage lights with purple haze. But behind this golden illusion, he was secretly crushed by an unfillable void of unbearable loneliness. His self-destructive habits created thick, invisible walls, leaving his family ties barely existing. He lived a chaotic double life, using drugs and booze as a failed survival strategy to escape fame's crushing pressure. The illusion shattered when a companion woke at 11 a.m. to find him motionless. Rushed to St. Mary Abbott's Hospital, the rock icon died in raw agony, choking on his own vomit from the massive barbiturate overdose. The suffocating horror of a musical prophet choking to death in a London flat violently collides with the cold tile of an abandoned bathroom, where a 90s rap titan was about to deliver his final, silent verse. Coolio. A cold bathroom floor inside an abandoned Los Angeles house became the final stage for a global rap titan on September 28, 2022. Found unresponsive after failing to emerge for hours, his life was ended by a heavy dose of fentanyl. This potent painkiller was his tragic survival strategy to dull a deep solitude, triggering a sudden drop into oblivion. Decades prior, he lived at the absolute apex of the golden illusion. Under the dazzling stage lights of the 1990s, he was a massive powerhouse and a generational icon after unleashing Gangsta's Paradise. The world revered his bold style, completely blind to the double life he hid behind the forgiving spotlight. But when the cheers faded, the illusion shattered. His fortune vanished from reckless spending and financial woes, exposing an unfillable void. The systemic blade of fame left him wasting away. Chased by a silent predator of addiction, his family ties completely broke, creating invisible walls between him and his children. He endured an invisible punishment of long, lonely nights before dying entirely alone without close pals or kin in sight. The cold stillness of a bathroom floor instantly transitions to a decaying Detroit room, where a founding queen of soul harmony faced a silent cardiac arrest. Florence Ballard. On February 22, 1976, inside a shabby Detroit room, a young woman suffered a silent, fatal cardiac arrest, entirely alone. Her cold body lay completely unnoticed for half a day until a neighbor discovered it, with her estranged daughter nowhere in sight. This was the devastating, solitary end of an artist the world chose to forget. Years earlier, she stood at the absolute peak of global music royalty, radiating under the golden illusion of pop supremacy. As a co-founder and the true vocal powerhouse of the Supremes, she dominated global charts with timeless anthems like Baby Love under the dazzling stage lights. She was a majestic icon whose talent captivated millions. But behind the scenes, intense group rivalry and corporate friction dealt a harsh blow, triggering a horrific sudden drop. By the late 1960s, she was brutally ousted from the group, causing her world to instantly shatter. Left with an unfillable void and facing an invisible punishment, she succumbed to a silent predator of alcohol addiction as a tragic survival strategy. Her career vanished, leaving her wasting away in severe poverty and deep isolation. The grand illusion of stardom teaches us that the brightest lights cast the deepest shadows, where a queen can be stripped of her crown and left to wither in the dark. The heartbreaking erasure of a soul queen from the music charts directly collides with the exploitative world of television, where a tiny child star became a multi-million-dollar cash cow for his own family before being discarded with absolutely nothing. Gary Coleman, a mere 4 feet 8 inches tall. This precise physical constraint defined a beloved child icon who captured the heart of a nation with a single, infectious catchphrase. Under the dazzling stage lights of different strokes, he was treated as a multi-million-dollar cash cow, earning over $8 million while projecting a picture-perfect family aura to the world. This was the golden illusion at its most deceptive. Behind the forgiving spotlight, however, a scandalous betrayal was being executed by his own parents and managers, who systematically siphoned away his entire fortune. When the show wrapped and he turned 18, his illusion shattered into a sudden drop. He discovered his wealth was entirely gone. The systemic blade of Hollywood abandoned him, forcing a former millionaire to survive on odd jobs as a mall security guard and sales clerk, while the public converted his life into late-night comedy punchlines. He spent decades wasting away within an unfillable void of intense poverty, betrayal, and isolation. A 2007 marriage to Shannon Price offered a desperate hope for a fresh start, but it rapidly deteriorated into a volatile, violent mess that became cruel tabloid fodder. The raw agony reached its climax on May 26, 2010, inside a tiny, quiet bathroom where he suffered a devastating fall, cracking his head on the hard floor and triggering a massive brain hemorrhage. Less than 48 hours later, his companion pulled the plug, ending his life at just 42 years old. No one claimed his body, and no proper funeral was held, proving a chilling truth. Hollywood will eagerly exploit a child's innocence and leave their adult remains in total poverty. The tragic exploitation of a tiny television idol cracking his skull in a quiet bathroom seamlessly bleeds into the raw, thumping bass lines of a hip-hop hurricane, whose multi-platinum records could never outrun the scars of childhood abuse. DMX. 5 million copies sold globally of his legendary 1998 debut masterpiece, It's Dark and Hell is Hot. 5 consecutive solo albums debuting at #1, cementing an unmatched, historic rap record. Over $30 million in peak financial net worth, decorated with sprawling luxury mansions and a fleet of custom sports cars. These massive, staggering digits engineered the golden illusion of a hip-hop hurricane who effortlessly ruled the global entertainment landscape. Yet, behind this multi-platinum shield lay a parallel sequence of agonizing numbers that meticulously mapped out his sudden drop into a dark, unfillable void. 14 years old, the exact tender age he was brutally introduced to crack cocaine while surviving chronic homelessness and severe physical abuse inflicted by his own mother. His stellar career could never heal this deep internal rage, leading to over 30 separate arrests for drug possession, domestic violence, theft, and fraud, which permanently transformed his private life into malicious tabloid fodder. $2.3 million in unpaid back taxes eventually triggered a 1-year prison sentence for tax evasion in 2018. Upon his release from jail, his financial empire hit rock bottom. Completely bankrupt, homeless, and devoid of music deals, he was left wasting away under fame's crushing pressure. The final forensic calculation unfolded on April 2, 2021. A catastrophic drug overdose induced a massive stroke, stopping his heart completely for 30 minutes and inflicting irreversible brain damage. For 9 agonizing days at White Plains Hospital, his skeletal frame lay frozen in a coma. He was left gasping for air through a mechanical ventilator, enduring an invisible punishment while hip-hop colleagues watched from a safe distance. Despite fathering over 15 children, none were there to anchor him. His labored breathing ceased forever on April 9, 2021, in total isolation. He died in debt, leaving an estate worth a pittance of just $1 million. The cruel arithmetic of Hollywood proves you can have millions chanting your name, yet still draw your final breath entirely broke and alone. These heartbreaking legacies of Hollywood royalty shatter the golden illusion forever. They prove that an unfillable void can consume anyone, even at fame's absolute peak. Behind the dazzling stage lights, the systemic blade spared no one. Do these tragic tales of raw agony tug at your heart? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the hidden truth behind Hollywood's shine. Thanks for watching. Bye and see you next time.